Hi, and welcome back to the channel. In this tutorial, we're going to cover how to convert the FAB ORM texture to a Quixel Bridge ORD texture. If you've downloaded any Quixel Bridge Megascan textures from FAB, you've probably noticed that they don't contain the ORD packed texture format anymore. Instead, there's an ORM texture map in its place. A quick refresher in case some of you aren't aware of what these are. An ORD texture is really 3 texture maps in one file. The red channel contains the Ambient and Occlusion map, the green channel contains the Roughness map, and the blue channel contains the Displacement or Height map. Thus the ORD naming convention, O for Ambient Occlusion, R for Roughness, and D for Displacement. In FAB, they replaced the Megascan's Displacement map with a metallic map. So they are now called ORM textures, with the M standing for metallic. Now this is a problem if, for example, you have a cobblestone texture and you want to displace the height on your mesh. To do that, you need the displacement or height map. So let's take a closer look at both of these in the Unreal Texture Editor to see why. So here's the old Quixel Bridge ORD texture. And if we isolate the blue channel, you can see we have the grayscale displacement map. The whiter the color, the more the texture in that area will be displaced. Now, if we look at an ORM texture downloaded from FAB and check out the blue channel, it's completely black because it's a metallic map, because cobblestone pavers don't have any metallic texture to them. Now, this is completely useless for displacement. Now, some have suggested you can use the roughness map in place, and in certain situations you might be able to get away with that, but it's not really an accurate representation of displacement for this texture, so I wouldn't suggest using it. So why is FAB doing this? Well, I suspect they're trying to align their textures to be more industry standard. Who knows? But as a result, we're left with 2 problems. First, where do we get the displacement or height map for this texture? And 2, how do we replace the metallic map in the new FAB ORM texture with the proper displacement map? So the question some of you might be asking right now is, why even do this at all? Well, if you're a beginner, it could be that your master material that you have doesn't have a slot for displacement or a height map, or you just don't have the skill set yet to go in and modify it and add the slot yourself. The other thing could be that you're working on a project, you just don't have the time to modify your master material, and you just want that old ORD format. Well, in either case, this video is for you. So back to our issue at hand. And it does seem that FAB does include a separate height map, but only with the 4K resolution textures. At least that's what I've been seeing so far and what others are reporting. Now again, we're referring to Quixel Megascan textures from the old Quixel Bridge site. This may not be the case for textures from Sketchfab, for example. So if your project requires a 1K cobblestone Megascans texture, after you download the 1K version and add it to your project, you'll also need to go back and download the 4K version to your project in order to pull out the separate height map texture. So here's an example of a cobblestone texture from FAB that I downloaded to my project, and it's 1K, 2K, 4K, and 8K versions. Let's take a look at the 1K folder of our cobblestone texture. And in it, you see we have the base color, normal, and ORM texture maps. That's it. So if we jump over to the 4K folder, you can see it includes our height map with the _H in the file name. So problem number 1 is solved. Now keep in mind, this might not be the case with every Megascans texture. So I'd suggest you first download the resolution you need and then check it. If it doesn't contain an ORD texture and there's no height map texture, then go ahead and download the 4K resolution, which FAB refers to as high quality, and then check that folder. Again, it seems that the 4K textures are the ones that have the height map in them, and that's just on the few that I've checked so far. Now on to problem 2. How do we replace the metallic map with our new height map? Well, that's where Unreal Engine's new Texture Graph feature comes in. This is a new experimental plugin that comes with Unreal as of version 5.4. And in this tutorial, I'll be using version 5.5 of Unreal Engine, but you can recreate this in version 5.4 and it should work just fine. Now, if you've ever used Blueprints or the Material Editor, you should be very familiar with the concept of nodes, and the texture graph operates the exact same way. Now, if you're skilled with Photoshop or GIMP or any other image editing software that allows you to create packed textures, you can certainly use them to replace the metallic map. All you need to do is just export the PNG files from your texture in Unreal Engine, then re-import the new pack texture back into Unreal. But I think using the texture graph is just a lot easier and you don't have to leave Unreal to do it. So first, we need to enable the texture graph plugin by going to Edit and then Plugins and searching for Texture Graph. Again, this is still experimental, so keep that in mind. So enable it, and then you'll need to restart your engine. So I've already done that. Okay, so let's start by creating a new folder, and let's call it Convert ORM to ORD. Now let's go inside that folder and then right click, and from the menu select Textures and then Texture Graph. And let's rename it TG Convert ORM to ORD, and then we'll open it up. Now, like I said earlier, this is a node-based editor that allows you to create your own custom textures, very similar to how Substance Designer works. So if you've ever worked with that before, this should look pretty familiar. So I'm going to switch over to the texture graph that I've already made, and I'll step you through the process over there. So as you can see, for what we need to do, it's literally only 6 nodes. Super simple. So first you need to drag in 2 texture source nodes. To rename them, make sure the node is selected and then hit F2. Rename the first one to ORM Texture Map, and we'll call the second one Height Map Texture. Next, we need to drag in 2 split channel nodes, one for each texture node. And connect the texture nodes to their respective split channel nodes, like I've done here. The split channel node splits out the RGB and alpha channels from each texture. Now drag in a combined channels node. That's pretty self-explanatory node. Next, connect the RG and alpha channels from your ORM texture to the combined channels node. Then connect only the R channel from your height map texture to the B channel of the combined channels node. The RG and B channels of the height map texture contain the same information, and typically the R channel is used in this case. So now our combined channels node contains everything from our ORM texture except the metallic map that was in the B channel. And we're going to be replacing that channel with our height map texture. Finally, select your output node and hit F2, and let's rename it to Output New ORD Map. And connect the RGBA pin from your combined channels node to the output node. So on our output node, let's click the little down arrow at the bottom, and let's set our file name to new ORD underscore map, and then let's point it to the folder we created to save the new file into. And finally, let's go up to the upper left hand side and click Save to save all our changes. And that's all there is to it. Now, to use it, just come over to your texture nodes here, and on your ORM Texture Map node, in the Details panel, select the FAB ORM Texture, just as you would in the Materials editor. And then do the same for your height map texture. Now to generate your new ORD texture, just click the Export button. You should find it in the folder you specified in your output node. So let's double click on it and bring it up in the Unreal Engine texture editor, and let's look at the blue channel. As you can see, it's our new height map. So back in our texture graph, you can also add a contrast and brightness node right after your height map texture. You can use this to adjust the contrast or brightness if you feel you want more control over your height map texture. So now just some words of caution that I've noted in my comments that you see in the graph here. First, your input textures must be the same resolution, or else the texture graph won't generate a proper output file. So if your project requires a 1K cobblestone texture, but the height map is only available in 4K, then you have to download the 4K ORM texture and place that in your texture graph. Once you export your new ORD file, you can then downscale your final ORD file afterwards down to 1K by double-clicking the ORD texture and setting maximum texture size to 1024 for a 1K texture, or whatever resolution you need. I'll show you how to do that later. Now, a second word of caution. While I was preparing this video using Unreal Engine 5.5, I did run into an instance where after I pointed my texture nodes to their respective texture files, I noticed in the preview window of the Split Channels node for my ORM texture that only half of the texture was displaying. Now, I assumed it was just a display bug and clicked on Export anyway, only to discover it wasn't a display issue. So keep an eye out on your little preview windows. If they don't look right, I found if you save your texture graph and then restart Unreal and go back into your project, everything will display fine. In version 5.5, this seems to happen after a while of pointing my texture nodes to various different textures as I was testing them out. Again, just restarting the engine resolved the issue in each case for me. So here's how to reduce the resolution on your texture files. This first method works in version 5.4 and 5.5. So double-click your new ORD texture to open it up in the texture editor, and look for maximum texture size. And set that value to your desired resolution, whether it's 1024, 248, etc. Just make sure that it's a power of 2. Then click Save. In Unreal version 5.5, you can also do it by right-clicking on your ORD texture and selecting Texture Source Reduce Size. Then select your desired resolution from the drop-down menu and click OK to convert it. If you then double-click to open up the texture in the texture editor, you'll see here it's been adjusted to the new resolution. There's one last thing I need to point out, and this might only be a 5.5 issue. Sometimes when you bring up the height map texture in the texture editor, they're completely white, like this one. Now to fix that, just change the compression to default, and now you should see your texture. Remember to click Save. So that concludes this video. If you found this tutorial helpful, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you're notified when the next video comes out. Thanks for stopping by and have a great day.